Welcome to Unapologetically Yours, a podcast where we go deep on everything from spirituality to relationships and connection to business and belief systems. Because in a world where we've been taught to play by the rules, it's time to live unapologetically. Hello, welcome to the latest episode of Unapologetically Yours. I'm your host, Ashley Logan, and I am so delighted to have one of the most sincere, talented, beautiful souls that I've had the pleasure of meeting over the last year join me today. Poet, teacher, breathwork extraordinaire, Kimberly Escamilla. Thank you for being here.
Thank you so much. It's my pleasure.
So Kimberly and I met through a shared connection with our friend Megan Sylvester, and we were both attended the Miracle Way retreat last November. And Kimberly, tell me a little bit about the work that you're doing and how you show up in the world.
Sure. So I have been a professor of English for about 30 years, but about 5 years ago, I got pretty serious about healing and about my healing journey. And through a series of events, moved my family to Costa Rica, left the US, and which was pretty monumental. And I started doing a lot of work internally. I had already been a meditation instructor, but I hadn't that's kind of the only healing practice other than my own yoga and things like that I had done. And while I'd been writing for myself creatively and teaching writing for years, I hadn't thought that much about some of the blocks I had had with creative aspects of writing and what the sources of those blocks were. And through a retreat where I did some breath work, I had a real shift in energy and met some great people who have been able to support me in getting back to my creative writing to where I've been able to finish through Gateless Writing a draft of my memoir, and which had been like in the works.
Congratulations.
Thank you. It'd been in the work for
amazing.
I'd been working on it off and on for a decade, but had a lot of inner critic problems. And so this really helped me move through that. And so I got the bug with breath work and just felt it was so transformational that I wanted to get trained in it. So I became a trauma-informed breathwork facilitator through Pause Breathwork, and it was a great program. And during that time, actually, we met first, right? Where I was doing my hours, and we did online breathwork before we got to meet in person. So that was fun.
I'd been seeing your name through our shared connections for a long time, both as, and I followed you because what's so cool. Well, let's start talking about, so you were a professor and a poet. Tell us a little bit about what you were teaching.
So,
and are teaching.
Yeah, I still am. I'm kind of in the fall season of my career with teaching, but I have taught composition and literature. Even my composition classes, though, I teach trauma healing. And my students always, sometimes they're shocked by that when they come in to learn how to write an essay, that's what they're learning about. But I've always felt committed to teaching what I'm really experiencing and going through, being a whole instructor, just like I want to know them as a whole student. And so I've been teaching at the community college level for quite a while. And this is my 30th year. And I've been writing and teaching poetry for a long time as well. So creative writing as well.
That's amazing. And I think that's what's so special is thinking, and that what I love about your journey is that while you were already in such a creative field that taps so deeply into your psyche and using that for trauma, and for me, writing has always been such a vehicle of healing and understanding my own emotions, but that you recognize that there was some that you wanted to go even deeper, and so then started taking on and understanding more somatic practices, starting with meditation, then the breath work and gateless writing. So I want to talk about all of those things because gateless is going to be a big focus of what we talk about today. But tell me a little bit about how you've used breath work to kind of tap into those new layers of creativity and uncovering different levels of trauma.
Right.
In yourself and others.
Right. I mean, while I loved meditation and continue to use it daily, it was, I'm pretty type A. I have a lot of to-do lists running 24/7, and it was really hard for me to fully drop in. And I think breath work allowed me a way to like physically move the energy and to have something to focus on so my mind could really be quiet. And that was the big game changer for me with breathwork compared to meditation. Again, I still do both, but they're for different things. And so for the writing, I personally, Gateless doesn't always do this, but they use meditation to get you into a softer state. And then we'll be given a prompt to...
Okay, so let's start at tell me, what is Gateless?
So it is
writing?
A system. Yeah, it is a system. And there's started by Suzanne Kingsbury. And she has now both an academy for gateless writers who want to learn craft in either memoir or fiction, nonfiction or fiction. And she does this process that she came up with from research. She had a similar experience to me, is that when she got into a traditional MFA program, she felt she got writer's block, and she felt like the process, which would be heavy critique and telling you everything that's wrong with what you're writing, really did a number on the inner critic, and she couldn't function under that sort of environment. And so she was a Fulbright scholar. She did all this work, and she came up with this system of being able to help people somatically know their inner wisdom and to write. And it's beautiful because it works equally for the professional writer as the novice. And it's used in all kinds of places. It's used in prisons. It's used in schools. It's used in theater. It's used in all these different places. And I've been using it with breath work as a way to work with clients, both who want to write and also those who maybe need writing as an additional somatic tool to get the stuck energy out.
Oh my gosh. So I was a creative writing major in undergrad, and I had one of my main advisors is a beautiful poet at the University of Tennessee, Marilyn Callett. And she was just such a delight and nurtured my writing so deeply. But not every professor was like that. And through the program, the assignments, for those who don't know, in writing, it is you take someone's piece and you really, you shred it. And there's not really any other craft, I feel like, that's like that, where you're putting your soul on the line. And like the questions that come up for me and many others in the arts, it's like, well, who gets to decide what's good and what's not good, and who gets to decide what has healed you to create, and how the impact it will be on other people. And so I think that that's such a incredible breakthrough and recognition that Suzanne Kingsbury had in developing the Gateless Writing program, that actually it can be a really positive experience to create. So let's just take it one layer deeper and talk about, like, what does gateless feedback look like? What does gateless mean? How does the process look? If you were to attend a gateless writing circle, what would that look like?
So what happens is whoever is facilitating will set up either meditation or something to get everyone, sort of lay out the ground rules, and then get everyone in a more meditative state out of their, beta brain. And then depending upon the focus of the group, offer a prompt. And then that prompt, the idea with the prompt is you don't know it ahead of time because you can't pre-plan. You can't think it out. You are going with your intuition, and you're going inward, and you're writing from that space, often the heart space. So it can be kind of emotional. It doesn't have to be biographical. It could come out as a list, a poem, a rant. It could come out as a polished scene. You never know. And then you write it out. 20 minutes or so of writing, 25 minutes. When you're done, we regroup in the circle. And from there, what happens is it's facilitated where each person reads and it is held. They've written it on the paper, they speak it out into the space, and the group holds it and offers and mirrors back positive feedback. What was powerful, what was lovely. Now, if you have a group of, professional writers in the group, they might talk more technically about what all the things you did that they love, but it doesn't have to be that. It can be the power of the voice, the power of the scene, the description, it doesn't have to be professional feedback. It's just all positive. Cool. Yeah. And then
that makes such a difference for
huge. No, it's huge. Yeah. It makes a huge difference.
So what happens in a group setting when
you give that feedback and people get really uncomfortable because they're not used to receiving compliments? And there's rules about you can't preface and you can't respond. You just listen and soak it in. And I've been in ones where after that we do like little energy healing right after, but I've also been in ones where you just go to the next person and it's really instructive to hear that feedback and to give that feedback and to listen like that. So that whole process becomes really powerful, really, really powerful. And then
so I've had the chance of being in, the first time that I experienced Gateless Writing was on a retreat in Tulum a couple years ago. And as someone who has always been a writer, I started writing poems, short stories, prose when I was old enough to write. And I have journal upon journal upon journal of writing over the years, and really had just kept it to myself. And so as someone who really loves the written word, I remember experiencing sitting in the circle, getting into a meditative state. And the result of getting into a meditative state is that that little body buzz, you just feel that connection to yourself. You have the chance to kind of set aside your other worries and really just feel. And a prompt could come in and be as simple as something like, tell us about a time something burned. And the group, it's so amazing is that every person who creates something from that prompt is creating something different. It could be something burned, could be like the time my mom burnt her toast because she left it in the toaster after getting a phone call about her grandfather passing away, and then going on to a whole relationship about that grandfather. And so the prompts don't have to be this massive tie. It's just what makes you think, what sparks something within you. Yeah. And the beauty that I saw with this is that every person is creating something completely different and then bringing it to the group. But what is the common thread is the experiences that people share. At least for me, I see the oneness in the group and how relatable each person's experiences are and what shapes them and what makes them, and from tiny moments to large swaths of time. And it's just amazing what can be created just from getting centered and then letting it go without that self-critique.
Yeah. No, it's super powerful. And the other piece I think that's really helpful for people, especially if you have a writing background or you want to write, is that you are separating the learning and practicing of craft from the critique part. So you're getting positive feedback during the creation process. And then later, when you've kind of done with that part and you're able to then come back and you want to decide how to shape it, then you can learn craft and put craft on this, right? And attend to details and things. But separate those. If you get critique as you're creating, it can shut your heart down. And it's just not helpful. And so that's part of the process of why I love Gateless. Yeah. And how I think it informs breathwork and breathwork informs it, for sure.
Gateless feedback too is non-selfish. It is something where you don't say when you're providing the feedback, you're not necessarily turning that back on oh, this reminded me of my experience and my. Instead, it's reflecting back to the author. So that feedback could look like something and what I also love is there's a third person element to it where you say the author, and you kind of separate even the author from the piece. Say, this piece made me feel like I was there. These words resonated with me. And it takes so much ego out of the sharing. And I think that too is so beautiful because it's just a moment where one can receive and see both the impact of their creation and also how it's not just the impact, but just the beauty of the composition.
Yeah, it's been, when I was mentioning before about, finishing teaching, part of what I've done is created this business between breath and sea. And so I've been able to kind of incorporate this in different places. So the breath work with Gateless. So using that one-on-one with people. And so that has a different flavor for Gateless, and then using it in small groups and retreats and with families and trauma healing groups and families with kids with special needs, and so it's been a wonderful process to use it in different venues and in different sort of collections of people.
It's amazing. Tell me a little bit about some of the breakthroughs that you've seen people have using Gateless.
I've seen people realize that they have permission to write about things regardless of what their family might think. That's a big thing. A lot of times they have never spoken about an event, an issue, or maybe they've talked to a therapist, but it's still bothering them. It's still coming up in triggers and in other ways. And I've seen Gateless open up kind of a portal for that. I've seen using the Gateless method with a group long-term help people commit to their own writing because they know that other people are showing up for them. And so that gets them really taking their writing more seriously, believing in themselves, getting confidence in their writing, like real confidence, that they can do it. And that's beautiful. It's beautiful to see people who've been crippled by the inner critic to come out and to be like, yes, my book is at the editors, or I just published, or whatever it is.
I feel like, especially with women who have been raised or taught to silence themselves, that the words that can arise and the situations and the scenarios that can come from a gateless experience is just so deeply therapeutic. And just regardless of if you share your piece out loud in a circle, which I highly encourage anyone who experiences gateless writing to do, to share, because your piece could really move someone and make a big impact. And that gateless feedback is so powerful. But just giving people the agency to remember that they have a voice, that they have deep feelings, that those feelings are allowed to be out there in the world in some form or fashion. And then also, like, I think about how Gateless is a vehicle for just accessing creativity. And creativity is, I talk a lot about the importance of creativity and the importance of creative expression, and how many adults get silenced from their creative outlets because of the capitalistic nature of, like, well, what are you going to do with that? How are you going to make money? Why aren't you spending your time? And like how productive we've all been kind of trained to be, that there's less room for the backyard musician and the hobbyist, but to just take a moment and for yourself in a meditated state and create, whether it's drawing, whether it's art, whether it's cooking and or writing. And how deeply therapeutic that is for connecting back to yourself as a person, your center, and your purpose.
Yeah, I definitely see that with folks that I work with. I have a few clients who are writing for the first time for themselves. And it feels like a lot of unlearning, unlearning how to not make the writing feel like, oh, I need to over-explain myself in order for it to hit these 3 bullet points for my client, for my customers or my readers. I'm like, no, like, just get messy, like, get it all out, like, feel deeply. And that's why the Gateless helps because you sort of are in a state where you're writing ahead of your thoughts. And so you're trying to get into that kind of core feeling or the thing that's in the unconscious and in the body, not necessarily something you've worked over and over and over again in your brain.
So then how has, for you as someone who's had this incredible career as a teacher and writer, how did Gateless shift your own work personally?
Yeah, I started to mention that. I did this MFA program and I wrote a lot during the program and published, individual poems, interviews. I've published some essays and things, but I knew I had a work in me that I needed to get out, and which was my memoir. And again, I'd started it over and over again, maybe 10 times. And I just would work on it for a few months. And then it would kind of peter out, or I'd take a class about, your opening scene, and I'd get all jazzed about it again, and I'd commit and I'd start writing, and then I wouldn't follow through. And a lot of it was my inner critic would cannibalize my work as I was working on it. Like I would start and I'd be like, okay, and I'd get this work going. And then I'd be like, no one's going to care, like in my inner mind. And so I'd just stop. And doing the Gateless Academy, which is like 9-month program, it really, it gave me the craft tools to kind of refresh on, all professional writers need to refresh on what they know and get different perspectives. And so it was helpful to get the craft, but I was with a pod of students and we shared like writing every week. Like we would like share writing and give feedback, and for 9 months. And I wrote my whole book. I was working full time and did it. Like I was like wanting to do it. Like when you have a book you couldn't put down, that's how I felt about my book, but I was writing it. And I was just like, oh, that scene, I want to write that. Now, a couple of the scenes were harder to write. And wasn't really passionate. I was like, had to force myself, but a lot of it was great. I was able to write it fully and just really feel passionate about it and see it coming. Like it made me go, oh, this is what people do. I have the skills to do this. I used to just think, oh, I'm just not good enough. And I realized, no, it just takes more support, a structure, and the environment, and you have to working through it. And so I was able to set aside my inner critic enough to get it done. And so that part has been exciting.
I mean, that's incredible. Can you tell us a little bit about your memoir?
Sure. It takes place, it's over in 3 parts, and it's over sort of 3 decades that are kind of condensed. And it's sort of my journey of learning about who I am. I had a lot of secrets in my family, layers of secrets of different sorts, and some childhood abuse as well. And so it was me unraveling all of that and getting the courage to be single with a child and to kind of work my way through that and to kind of get myself on a path of like stasis to get out of the trauma and to be kind of healing. It ends when my oldest son, who's now 24, it is like, a couple years old. It ends right there. So it's sort of in those first few decades and kind of about my healing path. But there's a lot of secrets that I kind of work through, and it's really great for Gen X folks because you'll recognize a lot of the lifestyle ways that we were raised and the things that were happening at that time period. A lot of descriptions that'll put you in the 70s and 80s for sure, and early 90s.
That's amazing. Congratulations. I'm so happy for you.
Thank you.
From knowing Kimberly and working with her directly, she is truly one of the most present, magical, and connected people who I've ever met. And when that comes to both your writing, and I've worked with you one-on-one in breathwork, and I would love it if you'd be willing to share like the excerpt and the Gateless prompt, a Gateless prompt and an excerpt of your piece, and how that kind of came to open up any breakthroughs that you had. Break down any barriers that you had.
Well, when I was writing the memoir, I wasn't sure that necessarily anything in Gateless was going to connect. And some of the calls we would be on would be like guest speakers. And sometimes we would be on these weekly calls where we would do a Gateless session where Suzanne would we'd get in a meditative state. She would offer a prompt and we would write, and then we'd come back And a few of us would read, to the group. And it was really powerful. And we, really loved it. And I was sort of surprised that in one of my sessions that we did that, her prompt just triggered a memory, and I wrote it, and I realized it was like an absolutely essential part of my memoir, and I didn't realize it back then. Like I didn't know I needed it until I did the prompt. So that's the beauty of Gateless, is that it just can kind of come up and you're like, wow, this is fabulous.
That's incredible.
Yeah. So this is just an excerpt, and it's called, the title of it's called I Don't Know Why She, like from the I Don't Know Why She Swallowed a Fly. September 1975. Reading came first and early, street signs out loud, no less, while we drove. Then headlines from the Record Searchlight, our daily newspaper that Mom draped open, reading to herself while sipping a cup of coffee. Television shows like Electric Company made it fun with their silhouetted actors pronouncing the syllables slowly. Sh, ip, ship, sh, ave, shave. But then my attention turned to books, and the only bookshelf stocked was in Mom's room, which we entered through the black beaded curtain. The room itself was always dark and cool, with one small narrow window near the ceiling. The light was on a dimmer, and when it was often kept low. She didn't make her bed very often, but when she did, there was a red velvet bedspread with tassels that brushed against the white shag carpet. Her room had its own wall air conditioner, which was a treat in the 3 months of 100-degree heat. Surrounding the built-in black bookshelf was wallpaper with gold and black scenes of Roman baths. I studied the nude figures who looked serenely into the distance. After I had memorized all my Sesame Street and Richard Scarry books, I used to sneak into her room and count and look at the book covers. Mom had a real mix in her 77 book collection, everything from Ernest Hemingway's gray and orange-covered Farewell to Arms, and Irma Bombeck's paperback adorned with cherries, and Truman Capote's In Cold Blood. Since these were too hard for me to understand, my early favorite was a big hardback entitled Hollywood Babylon. The cover was a portrait of Jane Mansfield with a dress cut so low her nipples were showing. Eventually, I could read captions and sordid summaries of all the movie stars. And even if I didn't understand what a dope fiend was right away, I quickly figured it out scouring that book. We had watched old movies every weekend for as long as I could remember, sometimes several in a row, so I knew all the actors by sight. Cary Grant, Ingrid Bergman, Katharine Hepburn, Jimmy Stewart, Humphrey Bogart, Montgomery Clift, Veronica Lake, and Fred Astaire. Pages about the real lives of these stars were exciting to read. There were chapters on all my favorites, including Errol Flynn and Marilyn Monroe. Robin Hood was wanted for rape, and Sugar Cane died of an overdose. Kim, that book stays in my room, she'd say, if she saw me with the book in the kitchen or the living room. Later, Mom bought me a set of orange young student Funkin' Waggles encyclopedia that she kept in the hallway bookshelf to satiate my curiosity for things beyond sex and Hollywood gossip. Before I started school, I practiced my letters on a small tablet Mom had from State Farm Insurance. I must have run out of paper or was bored one day when I carved a K backwards into the lime green cabinets. I was beginning the letter I before I heard my sister Marcy walk in from the room towards the kitchen. Kim, did you carve into the cabinets? A sister accusation more than a question. No, I reflexively lied when in trouble. Yes, you did. There's a backwards K right there. Were you trying to write your name? I know how to write a K, I replied, defiant. I found the back of an envelope and quickly wrote my name correctly as proof of my innocence. Whatever. You're going to be in trouble, Marcy replied. I don't remember the trouble, but a backwards K stayed for a decade before the kitchen would be repainted country cream.
Oh my gosh. I love how this narrator gave us the perspective of a young child in a spot that she shouldn't necessarily have been. I could picture her finger tracing the covers of the collection of different books, opening them up, knowing what wasn't for her, knowing what was dangerous, knowing what was to be explored or saved for later. And the sisterly wisdom of the reflexive lie. Not me, wasn't me. And then the extra proof. That was so beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah. It was fun. And again, not something I thought about much in my story, but then I realized later that books become like a salve for me throughout my story. They're a buoy. They help me get through so much of those early years that, of course, these early memories were really key to laying the foundation.
Wow. And what was the prompt for this piece, the Gateless prompt?
Yeah, she said, write about a time, your earliest memory connecting with either words or writing. And that was it. And everyone wrote something very different, like you said. But it was this came up, and then another scene where I wrote like a little thing in my kindergarten class, and which is a part of that chapter. And it comes together really beautifully, and I wasn't expecting it.
Wow. That's so special and so powerful. And I think that one of the things that I love to convey to anyone listening is the power of the written word, the power of just, whether you're journaling, whether you're just expressing and releasing whatever is in your body and your stories. Your stories matter. Those moments of impact are worthy of being expressed, whether to yourself or to others. And it's been a huge part of me sort of like recalibrating as an artist and a writer.
Yeah. Well, you should read some of what we worked on a little bit.
Okay. Yeah. So here is something that I haven't shared before. So after Kimberly and I met in Costa Rica in November 2023, I had been working privately on a collection of pieces from Gateless experiences, and then from just writing on my own. I had really suppressed my inner poet for a long time. And again, like I have journal upon journal upon journal of writing from when I was growing up and always had an interest in poetry in high school, and then was a creative writing major in college, and wrote and expressed, and really until the time when I became a mother. And I just didn't have the space. I didn't know how to ask for the space. I didn't know how to create the space. And when I experienced Gateless for the first time, it was like something completely cracked open with me that would never go back in. I would never be able to not be a writer again. And so when I met Kimberly, and I reached out to her because a little tiny seed was planted that this is someone that I really want to work with. And not just because we have shared values when it comes to breathwork, somatic practices, healing, and are on similar pathways generally, but because she also has that deep talent, one as a writer herself, but also as a teacher. And working with someone who felt so nourishing and nurturing was so important to me as I was kind of stepping back into my skin. So we started working together on a collection of pieces that sort of epitomize my transition over the last couple of years of the moment of recognizing that I had lost myself, and then the journey back to reclaiming it, and the parallels of what I was experiencing in my home life, work life, personal life, and how that juxtaposes with what's happening to so many of us at a society level. And Kimberly said yes, and we started working on these pieces together.
Well, and what I love about working with you is that, you have all of these things already in you, and you've written already. And so it was just a matter of looking at it with love, looking at your manuscript with love and asking the right questions. And that's really all it was. It wasn't like teaching you anything. So, yeah.
There's so much more there too, but thank you for saying that. And so I haven't shared any of the pieces publicly. So I will. I would be happy to. So I know that you have a favorite. We're not going to share that one.
Okay.
Okay. I will. I've got one. This is called My Fire. And this was one that was written, it was a kind of a gateless session that I had done by myself, which I don't even know if that is allowed, but I spent a lot of time last summer sitting out by a fire in my backyard, just kind of trying to navigate all the different things that were taking place in my life as a mom, in my home, as a professional, and then also as someone who was really interested in kind of shedding some skin. And okay, I'll read it. Called My Fire. Tending from embers, rising from ashes, my heart, longing and yearning, then still. Years went by, listless and grinding, not sitting with the fire, until I did. I heard the voice inside of me, beating like a heartbeat at first, until it banged like a drum. Now I listen, wiping the blood from my womb on my cheeks, reading faces and cards, standing for more. I won't let the empty bodies, the black of soulless eyes guide me, just the drum that beats from my heart through the cave of my garden to the soles of my feet, tending to my wild like a witch. But that's not what we are called. We are called woman. And we've been here before, our stories woven together, and we won't stay caged. I won't stay caged. And if my lot is to pave the way, to carve the path, then so I go. A hawk above me, a wolf beside me, a spider on my shoulder, a snake in my veins. I will put my feet in the earth. I will seek water. I will breathe air. I will burn. I will rise.
Beautiful. I love it. I love that. And I love revisiting it. It feels wonderful to hear it read aloud. This idea of a woman finding her way and her place in the collective is really beautiful, from an outside sort of by the fire to the collective fire, to the collective experience of women, and to have the imagery around, the wolf and the water and all of that together, and the hawk. We get this sense of the beginning of a journey, which I deeply appreciate.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much. I'm excited to share more of this collection eventually. I'm like many of the things that I set out to do as a manifesting generator. I don't always know where it's going to take me, but I am very happy to have collaborated with you on these, 20 or so pieces, and we'll start releasing them into the world, because it is this narrative around like coming home to oneself. And in this society, especially for women and mothers, where people ask so much of us, and without seeing our whole selves. So we get to be career people in this one specific box, and we get to be mothers in this one specific box, but we aren't encouraged to be seen as our full selves, as our whole selves, as our true selves, the self that is flawed, the self that is sensual, that has cracks. And I think that creates this expectation of women in our society that is just absolutely untenable. It's something we can't sustain.
Your piece, without giving anything away, is super relatable and satisfying. Like when you want to see women make it and feel what they're feeling and kind of like cheer women on, your book is going to do that for women.
Well, thank you so much. I appreciate it. And I am curious, what are some things that people at home can do to bring a writing practice or gateless practice into their lives? And what do you think would be the benefit of that for those listening who want to kind of tap into that part of them that maybe be lost?
Right. I liked that you earlier said about, I did sort of gateless by myself, because I think not everyone can have access to community to write it, which is ideal because you get all this support, and it's built in. But when you're on your own and you don't have that community, even though there are a lot of gateless teachers and practitioners out there, is being able to just, if you have the desire to do daily writing practices. And so you can do it in a bunch of different ways. Some people like to just journal out. Like I have friends who are professional writers, and every day they just like unload whatever comes up, and they journal in the morning and they kind of unload. And they give themselves prompts. Other people use books like Natalie Goldberg's book, or one of the others, that The Artist's Way, or a book about creativity, or a book that has writing prompts. Those can be really helpful for people who need structure. But I think being able to...
I love The Artist's Way.
Yeah.
By the way. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a great book. Being able to have identify what's the thing that's wanting out and kind of connect with that. And then writing from that space. I think writing the thing that scares you, writing the thing that maybe no one else, you're not sure if you want to share, get it on paper anyway. All of that I think is...
Gosh, that resonates. Like writing the thing that scares you, saying the words that you're scared to say. And, sometimes I found at least that I can, in writing, explore what's true and what's not true. So say there is a thought that I have about a relationship or about how I'm showing up, I can write this all down and then decide, is this actually true? But by not thinking about it too much, I can find out, okay, am I really angry about this, or am I afraid about this? Where am I missing love? And ask myself these questions to kind of self guided. It's written therapy.
It's a beautiful way to learn your inner self. It's a fabulous way to learn what's really true about what's going on inside yourself.
And I think that is especially true for those who have had their voices silenced, who are coming out of trauma, coming out of toxic situations, and even those who just feel a little bit lost. Anytime I've adopted a practice like The Artist's Way, to give those listening a little bit of background, it has a morning practice called Morning Pages. And basically you just fill 3 pages, and you can even just be blah, 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 blah. But the goal is that you start your day and you fill these pages, and with whatever's on your mind. Doesn't have to be cohesive thoughts. It's not, this is different than poetry, prose, etc. Or maybe it would turn into that. There's no rules here, but just fill the pages so that you get what's in your mind and heart out on the page, so that you can show up as your most creative, fearless, loving self throughout the day. And then other practices that are really helpful. That's one that I do when I'm kind of stuck. Another, when I notice that I'm showing up from a place of fear, is gratitude. So just make a list of 10 things that I'm grateful for and start every day with that list. And trying to be deep and go specific. And, some days it's I want to thank me. I want to thank me for showing up. That's speeches. But, and it makes all of the difference. And then also giving yourself permission to express, to talk about the thing that's on your mind, to talk about the desire that you have that's in your heart, to talk about to explore the thing that scares you.
Yep, for sure. I mean, I think it's key. And the other aspect I would emphasize is that you might have thought, oh, well, I've written everything, or I've done all I've explored everything. There's so much more that as you're writing something, writing a memory, writing a scene, writing something, that you will new things pop in. Once you're started to relax into that process, you get ideas, you get creativity, you solve issues, things come in, insight comes in. I had a breathwork session with Meg actually, and we were doing Fists of Fury in one of my other retreats with her. And I realized how angry I was about something I just sort of pushed aside and said it was no big deal. And I realized I hadn't processed that anger, and it came up during that. And I wrote this poem afterwards that embodied all that anger. Now, it's probably not a poem I'm going to publish, but it was one I needed to write. I needed to get it outside of my system. And so it was really a beautiful process for me to tap into something that was unconscious.
Wow. Now, as someone from the trauma-informed perspective, you do a lot of work in that space. Why is it so vital for people to process those feelings and those emotions?
Well, if they're not processed, they come up in other ways. They come up either as illness, depression, lack of sleep, inability to sleep. They just come out in less healthy ways. And so if you're able to get them out somatically, you can just feel lighter. You can live daily without feeling like this huge up and down management of unprocessed stuff in your body. You don't get triggered so easily by circumstances, things like that. I notice people who have a lot of unhealed trauma tend to be really reactionary in the world and tend to get, overwhelmed easily and really struggle unnecessarily, right? And so that's the part. I have a lot of empathy for people in those spaces because I was there for a really long time.
I don't know why that made me just choke up. There's just so much power in expression. There's so much power in release and so much power in just acknowledging. And I think that we all have to recognize the agency that we have to show up for ourselves and our life and release those things and look them straight in the eye. And I love that takes courage.
I love working with women in particular, but just anyone who is at the early stages of that process, to really mirror back to them how much power and agency they have when they don't believe in it yet.
So speaking of that, how can people work with you, Kimberly?
Oh, sure. So I have, they can connect with me on not all the social media, Facebook and Instagram. I'm on there with my name, Kimberly Escamilla, or Between Breath and Sea is my website, my business. All one word.com, betweenbreathandsea.com. And right now, since I'm in the US right now and I'm pretty tapped with like private clients and things and my own work, but I'll be returning to Costa Rica. I have gotten it down, like the online breathwork sessions and gateless sessions. I do those online. And so when I do a group one, if someone wants to come in to check, those are normally donation based and a nice way to see if your breathwork is interesting, connected to you and you get something out of it. But yeah, I can do gateless sessions. I do private one-on-one with folks and small groups. Yeah. And if you're ever
so amazing. I can't
come see me.
Yeah. I'm going to book a trip now. I want to come and do some gateless writing and breath work with you in Costa Rica. Yeah. But I think that the gifts that you have are so many, and combining those somatic with creative practices is, I think, something that that the collective deserves to see and know are intertwined, because I think that creativity is really the universe communicating through us. And so taking the time to tune in and taking the time to tap into your own inner wisdom, again, not necessarily for the purpose of connecting with an audience, just be with release for yourself and healing as an individual, so you can show up in life the way that you're meant to. Yeah,
for sure.
Okay, so I have a request.
Oh no. Okay.
I am sure that many people listening have not experienced Gateless. Would you be willing to give our listeners a prompt for them to try at home and some instruction around, I want to preface this for anyone listening, this is not a typical Gateless structure. And anytime you can be in circle and experiencing great Gateless writing as a group, but maybe this would inspire you to get together with a small group and create a Gateless circle. Being a facilitator you have to have training and all of those things, but knowing that creative expression is so important. I don't know. What do you think? What do you think, Kimberly?
Yeah. I think one, if you're working with folks who are, have dealt with trauma or have things where they haven't been able to access, I definitely think being able to write about an experience where you have been silenced and where it's an early experience of being silenced, and or were you self-censored, like you censored yourself from outside pressure, or you were you were silenced in a direct or indirect way. And allowing yourself to get in a meditative state and to, before choosing what you're going to write, not overthinking it, just allowing like early memories to come up and choosing the one that pops up, that comes up to the surface. And writing it out in detail. And the detail's important. You don't have to tell a story in this. You don't have to tie it up with a bow. Get us in that scene, get us in the detail of like the sensory experience of being in that moment. And that's where sort of the magic can happen.
I love that. And I know that also even just sitting and thinking about that, a time when you've been silenced, a time when you have self-censored. Yeah. And there's lots of those moments for all of us, especially
sure.
Women.
Sure. Yeah.
It has been so wonderful having you on today. Thank you so much. I have one more question for you.
Yeah.
What are you doing to show up in your life unapologetically?
I'm actually getting ready every morning. I live in Costa Rica, and we normally don't do the hair and makeup and the stuff. And I'm like, okay, there's a social expectation here, but I want to like this. And so I bought lip gloss and I bought mascara for the first time in 4 years. And I bought a blouse, and, so I'm trying to I'm unapologetically investing in myself in those ways, which I normally don't. And it feels good.
I love that. And you look amazing, by the way. I noticed right away. I was fumbling with the cameras and the sound and all of those things, and didn't take a moment to be like, you look beautiful. And that's a great color on you. So,
Thank you. Thank you.
I love that. Thank you for being here. And for everyone listening, take a moment and express yourself, whether that's through starting a morning writing practice and trying it out and just see what comes out on the page. Give yourself permission to just release and not worry about the outcome and not worry about anyone reading it, and just start to let go of all of those words that have been unsaid, that are bottled up in your body, and so that you can start to just have some more agency over all of the ways that you show up in the world. And knowing where you are is important, and knowing what experiences you're carrying with you, knowingly or unknowingly, is a big part of that. So thank you again, Kimberly. We will share all of your information in the show notes, and look forward to your memoir being released into the world. I cannot wait to read it. Thank you again for sharing your beautiful words and for all of the time today. Thank you so much for tuning in. Go out, make some mischief in the world. And until then, I'm Ashley, and I'm unapologetically yours.